Hey everyone, if you want to see what a backend interview is like, I just hosted a mock backend interview. For the interviewer, I invited on Scott. He was my boss's boss, I think CTO, and then eventually became VP of engineering. He manages a pretty large team right now, and he has hired hundreds of engineers. He's very kind-hearted, and very candid, which I appreciate both sides of that. But we invited on Eric, the brave soul, who is an aspiring developer, definitely with an interest in backend from what it sounds like. And he decided he wanted to get a taste and a feel for what a backend interview is like. So I hope you like it. Enjoy.
All right. So, Eric, we got about an hour. And what I like to do here is I want to take about no more than 10 minutes at the top of the hour here, learn a little bit about you. What kind of motivates you? What's got you looking for a new role? What does good look like in your next role? What does bad look like? Just get to understand a little more about you. Then we'll dive into a coding portion, some virtual whiteboarding, just kind of dive into some problems and discuss things. It's meant to take more than the hour. So if you run out of time, that's fine. That's by design. I just want to give us an opportunity to get our hands dirty and dig in. And then at the bottom of the hour, any questions that you might have for me. So we'll leave some time at the end for that. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Cool. Give me the 10,000 foot view. What are you doing right now? What's good? What's bad? What's got you looking?
Sure. So just a little bit about me. I actually was in a blockchain startup for a couple of months, and I quit that back in early September. So I got my hands a little dirty, coming from no coding background or programming experience, and that got me interested in the full stack. So, front end, back end, everything. I wanted to learn it all. I gained a little bit of experience from that. But I wanted to gain a bit more hands-on experience and kind of do my own thing and do production code. So I took the leap of faith and I decided to join New Camp's bootcamp, which was a coding bootcamp, and they offered a Python backend program, which I started in early October, and I've been learning and growing since then.
Great. So the blockchain startup, you didn't have any programming experience prior to that?
No, nothing prior to that. That was pretty much my first language I learned wasn't actually Python, and it was actually a smart contract development language called Solidity. And I did get a little bit, dirty with that, learned a little bit of this, the syntax, but other than that, nothing really major.
Interesting. What did that look like? What was the learning path of that like for you? Was it self-driven? Did you have learning materials?
So most of it was somewhat tutorial based, but I did play around with the production code base a little bit. So I got to, gain a little sense of the land. So played around with the smart contracts, see how the smart contract development process goes, how these contracts interact with different contracts, and how it communicates with the blockchain. I honestly will say it was a very valuable experience for me. So Solidity itself is very syntax similar to JavaScript. So, we all know how JavaScript can be syntactically. So it was definitely not the most friendliest first language to learn, for sure, which is why I kind of thought, maybe it's time for Python instead. But that's where I'm at. I now would consider myself a Python maxi, but I do appreciate both languages and frameworks now.
Have you ever seen that meme of the JavaScript reference manual and the JavaScript, the good parts, and it's like this thick? Right?
I haven't seen that exact one, but I feel like I've seen derivatives of those.
I have my copy of the good parts right over there. I can see it. It's like this. It's pretty valid. Okay, very cool. So you left the blockchain gig.
Yes.
What prompted you to leave that, and what have you been doing since then?
Sure. So as typical startups happen, difficulty generating revenue, definitely difficulty with getting the right guidance and help that I needed at the moment. We wear a lot of hats. That's the cliche that we all hear, and I think in the moment I was looking for a bit more guidance, a bit more hands-on, a bit more, I want to be able to do my own code. I want to actually hands on the keyboard as opposed to, learn this tutorial, learn that tutorial, and you can play around with this code base, but nothing will be pushed to production that you touch. So it felt like, what am I really doing here? What am I actually learning? So now I'm really glad I went to the bootcamp route instead.
And what have you done since the bootcamp? Are you on the hunt for the first gig or?
So I quit the startup in September, and then I took a few weeks off, and then I joined the boot camp early October, and going through the boot camp now. Right now, my biggest side project that I'm working on is a Spotify clone. So this is a CRUD app, but it's something that I've really been enjoying the process of learning. So I've been spending more of my time doing that. And on another side project that I'm working on is also playing around with smart contract development, but not with Solidity. It's a different, it's more of a Python language called Viper. And hopefully I'll be able to make my own smart contract code base.
Very cool. I'm just Googling smart contract.
Oh, sure.
Look at that. What's in terms of the work that you're doing, getting into the application development side of things?
Mm-hmm.
What are you enjoying?
This may sound very cliche, but during those bouts of frustration and those aha moments, and I know that we all know those are the moments where in the midst of it, you want to bash your head against the keyboard and you wonder why you got into this mess. But after that light bulb goes off, you begin to realize, this is why. And then those light bulb goes off and you realize, this is why, and it makes perfect sense logically, syntactically. But then up until that moment, it's very frustrating, but it's nothing like it. It's very cathartic. I can't imagine doing anything else. It's such a intellectually stimulating, rationalizing. It's really a different way to look at the world, I would say. And I honestly couldn't have chosen a better career path.
Lovely. Yeah, no, I totally get that. The point that I always go back to with folks, even late career, is performance is kind of the thing that I've always enjoyed. And namely because when it comes to performance, generally speaking, it's never what you think it is. It always requires your digging. It always results in the aha moment. Like you constantly get that dopamine hit, no matter how experienced you are when you're investigating that. That holds true for a long time because that definitely can be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
What don't you enjoy doing?
Definitely the feeling that I will always be 3 steps short, or one step short or something. It's always my fault. It's never the piece of technology. Well, I mean, sometimes, but 99% of the time it's something that I did wrong, something that I overlooked. And as a perfectionist, it's definitely difficult to let that ego go and, just keep digging and keep researching and keep asking for help and kind of building that kind of sense of it's okay, you'll learn and grow from this experience, whatever how big the problem can be. But I think that's honestly the most difficult challenge is letting the ego go and understanding that it's all part of the journey of learning and growing. You will never find someone that mastered a language or mastered a framework. Everyone's learning and growing, and it just comes with experience and time.
Yeah, and Don and I have definitely talked about this before, that confidence is the hardest thing to build. And my coaching to junior level engineers is, I can only say it's the ones that don't work for me, because I can't tell you to work outside of your work hours, but to just always have a project, always be working on something, always have something that you're on the side, because it helps to get a lot of that out of your system fast. And can't disagree with you on that point.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So like I said, I want to spend about 10 minutes just kind of diving into you. Thank you for that super high level, a lot of talking there.
Sure.
Appreciate doing that deep dive. What we'll do now is we'll switch over to a virtual whiteboard. Okay. And I will shoot a note into the chat with the link. And then I will share my screen on the stream. And then question for you, I think I know the answer, but there is no wrong answer for this. What language would you like to use?
Python, please.
Python 2 or Python 3?
Python 3.
Okay. So what we'll be doing is we'll be building out Secret Santa, or I think White Elephant is the other term this goes by. And it's just programming the rules of the game. So Secret Santa has 3 basic rules. You put names into a hat, you pull the names out, that's the person you're going to give a gift to. In order to write the game out, we need to follow 3 rules. Each player, and I gave a list of players here, it's just an example, Barney, Wilma, Fred, Pebbles, and Bam Bam. Each player will pull a name, and they can only give a gift one time. Each person can only receive a gift from another player one time. You can only give or receive. You cannot give or receive to yourself. And then fourth point here, is that this should happen at random. So every time we run this, we actually want it to come up with a different result. So no real rules on what the input looks like or the output looks like, just that we are capable of pairing things up. So whatever you're comfortable with there. But what I've done here is put together a quick Python example where we have this simple function called go, and it just returns obviously a static result right now, but it's showing the relationship in terms of pairs of strings. And so, for the input, Fred, Wilma, Barney, Pebbles, and Bam Bam, you get out this result. We can run the code where Barney gives to Wilma, Fred gives to Betty, et cetera, et cetera. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. I tend to do these things however you're comfortable, right? So these are obviously be a little bit nerve-wracking experiences, having to do some virtual whiteboarding. If you need to Google anything, feel free to Google it. If you want to talk through anything, feel free to talk through it. Otherwise, I'll let you just kind of get started and let me know, what you need.
Sure. Okay. So I'm just going to go through ahead and read it to myself. So given a list of players, pair up players so that each player gives a gift once. Okay. So each player receives a gift once. Okay, so no repeating. Players cannot give or receive to themselves. Makes sense. Selects must be random. Okay. Okay. So these are the players. So run the function and then okay. Okay, so let's think. So we're putting in this list and we need to be able to get back an array of arrays. Okay, so this one's, they can't be duplicates and it can't be repeating. Okay. So my first thought is to begin with some sort of to iterate through this list of players and to so I want to be able to somehow first categorize these players. Initially, I was thinking about doing some sort of for loop, so that way I can iterate through and assign each player to a different player. So, Fred with Wilma or Barney with Pebbles. My second thought is I could do that, or I could do first assign this list and put it into an empty dictionary. So I could do Fred with someone and then Wilma with someone. My thought process right now is going towards the latter option, as that could potentially help me prevent these conditionals where I can then somehow have a statement that will allow me to use that dictionary and say, if within the dictionary, if Fred has already given a gift, then they cannot give again to another person. Let's see. So, let's see. So we have this. So turn that. So we just need to pair it up with another one. So Let me think. So we have this list, and so let's try that. So let's have some sort of empty dictionary. We'll just call it temp. And in this empty dictionary, I want to add all of the players and assign them to add them to the dictionary. So let's, I guess this instead. And so we're given players and turn. So I'm thinking if we can add them into the dictionary. So we're inputting a list, and we want to return a list of tuples, actually. Mm-hmm. So then we want to package them up into tuples. What would be the best way to do that? Let's see. To go from a list to packaging them up. Let's see. So let me do list to packaging. So we have a list, and you can just cast it as a tuple. But how would, I guess that's worth a shot. So instead of going with the dictionary, we can take the list, so whatever the list is, and then just package it up as a tuple. So we'll just call it my tuple, and we'll cast it as a tuple. And once it's casted as a tuple, then we can iterate through. Let's see. So
let me ask you this: does it matter at this point if it's a tuple or not, or even in the output? Tuple. My example is actually just a list of two.
Let's see. So you're saying it shouldn't. Well, you're asking if it does matter or not.
Yeah, I mean, we're spending details on how we're going to iterate over the list. Mm-hmm. It's Python. We can cheat. We're not doing the type safe version of Python. At least I didn't hear. This is Python 3. This is copied and pasted from. I know it is. But do we need to worry about switching it to a tuple before we go through any iteration or anything like that, or can we work with it in place?
I see. So getting the list and so we get the list of players, and we want to randomly
So think about this in terms of the context of the real game, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, this is software, so we can cheat a little bit here at certain points. But this was an actual game. We've got a whole bunch of names in a hat, right? Mm-hmm. Theoretically, we have that here too. It's within the players array.
Right.
And then the actual game is you got Barney, Wilma, Fred, Pebbles, and Bam Bam standing around in a circle. Mm-hmm. It's just for the sake of keeping it simple, say that I'm using the example input in the comment up top. Barney's the first person in the circle. Barney picks a name. Wilma picks a name. Fred picks a name. So we just start by emulating that experience.
I see. So, starting off with, so it's like an order of players picking names out of a hat.
Yeah, the order is superfluous. Like I said, we can cheat. This isn't a real game. And it's just software. So, I mean, we have a list of players. They're in an order. The order just happens to be the order that I typed them in here.
Right.
But can we replicate the process of each person and iterating over this? And you touched on this earlier, right? Just a simple for loop of going through each player and pairing them up with somebody else would be the act of pulling the name out of the hat.
Right.
But the first step there is kind of going around in that circle.
Right. So we still want to be able to iterate through the list of players. Right. So for every player in, for every player in the list of players, you want to be able to choose one of them. So let's say we're iterating through the list of players, and we want to, I guess, assign each player with another player. So let's see.
So if we just toss a quick line in here right now, in terms of what we have at this point, right, is we're effectively passing the hat around the circle.
Mm-hmm.
So the next thing we need to do then is how can we represent the hat with a randomized, seemingly randomized, right? How can we represent the hat in a way where we can pluck a name out and get something at random?
We could choose, we could just have it somehow, we could use like a random function, like that would select out of the list just a random number within that list. So somehow make it so that it will pick the first one in the list or the third one in the list.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's an option. I do not remember those off the top of my head, so I assume you're going to need to look that up. But there's a million mechanisms for that.
So I guess kind of going back to my original idea of maybe we could assign each player to a dictionary that would give us a number, and then we could use the random module, the random integer, and then select a random number, which will be assigned to a random player within the list.
So if I'm visualizing this correctly, we have 5 keys in this example: Fred, Wilma, Barney, Pebbles, Bam Bam.
Yep.
Fred gets a 4, Wilma gets a 1, Barney 0. Just kind of random indices within that list.
Mm-hmm. And then, so now implementing it. So let's see. So I'm assuming you can do imports here.
Yeah, those work.
Okay. So can do so from the first to, so we first want to get the temporary dictionary, and then we also want to append everything in the players list to the dictionary. So just do append and then players. And once we've done that, we can assume it'll be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so from 0 to 4, it'll give us a random number, and we can store that into what we call random choice. And with that random choice will be the selected individual. Now, to have that randomly selected individual be assigned to a specific player, let's see. So we're iterating through the list, and we've appended the list to a dictionary so that we're able to randomly choose a player based off their number. Now we just need to assign the randomly chosen player to a list. So, but we also want it to be, so we should only choose this if the let's see. So we want to be able to, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, let's say. And then so we'll say, and then I guess we could do have this. So we have them as a dictionary, and we are looping through that. We've appended it to a dictionary, and now we just need to assign the player to a number. So I guess we could can we do something like where so within the dictionary, we could do something like this, where a specific index from the dictionary gets assigned to
Well, I think following where you're going here, I mean, we're assigning numbers 0 through 4, right? Those numbers tightly align with the indices of the input list, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm following it correctly, it sounds like as long as we can uniquely assign those numeric values to the keys within the dictionary, then we know which index in the input list is the pair, right? Mm-hmm. I agree with that approach. That certainly solves the problem. I think that the challenge that I see initially, the problem we should think through next is how do we ensure uniqueness? Because you're kind of like whiteboarding here, so I'm just going to restructure this just a little bit, just so we're looking at it in the same way here.
Sure.
But if we're doing this here in a loop like that, so we initialize the dictionary, and then for each player, we're going to append, this would be I, right? There we go.
Oh, yes.
Right. So we're appending I, and then into that dictionary. So now you have this empty key there. And then you're going to assign that value. But what happens if rand choice on loop over the first one, we get Fred. Fred gets assigned rand choice, which is a random integer from 0 to 4, and picks 1.
Sure.
And then Wilma and rand choice, being a random integer from 0 to 4, also gets 1. Mm-hmm. Now we've broken rule number 1 and 2. Mm-hmm. I guess 2, yeah. So we eliminate that uniqueness. So how can we, following the solution that you're going with, what are ways that we can start to ensure the uniqueness of the values that are picked at random?
Sure. So we would have to have some sort of way to ensure that once a number has been chosen, then it does not get chosen again. So we could have an if clause where it'll take, so let's say Fred gets 1, so he gives it to Wilma. So, and then Wilma gets 1 again. So we would have to prevent that from happening. So if Rand's choice, I guess maybe something we would somehow have to. Okay, so from the dictionary. Okay, so Fred gets so we iterate through, and they get assigned numbers, and we want to make sure that they are not giving it to themselves nor to someone that's already has someone else. So we need to somehow.
Actually, that reminds me now. There's actually the 2 constraints we have to be worried about, right?
Mm-hmm.
If Wilma gets 1, that's her random choice. It's actually giving to herself. So there's also that concern.
Right. So we pretty much have to ensure uniqueness throughout. So I guess so. In the first iteration, pen and choose random number, and if a random choice has been already selected, and so if a certain number from 0 to 4 has already been chosen, it should not be chosen again. That's kind of what it boils down to. So if 0 has already been chosen, has been already assigned, then it should not be chosen again by not only the same person, but other people as well. So if rand choice, I guess, how do I now define whether it was chosen? So I guess the question then becomes what I guess I have to use the dictionary from the dictionary if
By the way, if it's easier to pseudocode, that's totally fine.
Sure.
Because as I'm thinking through this, I'm thinking of like a zillion APIs that I do not know off the top of my head. I'm not going to hold you to the same to any higher standard than that.
So let's see. Right. Let's see. So I just need to be able to have some way to determine. So, So random choice pretty much has to be unique after the random number is chosen.
What's a way that we could, as we're iterating through the list of players, we got 2 problems to solve. But let's look at the first, actually problem number 3, really. You can't give or receive to yourself. How can we solve for that one? Or is there an easy way that we could solve for that one just by virtue of iterating through the list and knowing what position we're at?
So let's see, players cannot give or receive to themselves. So once we go through the first iteration of the loop, maybe something like if the random choice has already is maybe something like if rand choice is equal to 0, then it should take that out of the available choices. So
part of it, so that would be 0 has been given a gift now.
Right.
We're ensuring the uniqueness of point number 1 by iterating through the list one by one. And so we're only going to iterate it once. And so everybody gives a gift once. In terms of 0, and again, I'm pseudocoding here. I don't believe this is valid Python. Clearly, I don't do a ton of programming these days. But if we did something like this, where we were able to iterate over the list and get both the name itself,
sure,
Fred, Wilma, but then also the index in the list.
Sure. Right. So
if that just being self-aware of where we are in the source list.
Sure. So then that would give us not only the actual value in the list, but also the index. So then we would need to do something like this, I believe, where we then can get both values, and then if we do that, then we can access the player's index. So if the rand choice is equal to the same index of the players, so for example, if in the first iteration 0 was chosen, then that means Fred is already taken. He's already giving a gift to someone, and it should hit this, where if 0 is equal to, so in the players, and it is equal to the first iteration, so Fred's, which is at 0, then we would we should somehow now have logic that'll skip over Fred for the next iteration.
Well, in this first pass, right? First execution of the loop, only one iteration happening here. The first value is Fred. The index is 0. Fred reaches into a hat. He pulls out 0, or in other words, he pulls out Fred, right? Because index 0 is Fred. Fred can't give or receive to himself. So if it was a real game of Secret Santa, what would we do?
We just put it back in and have him repick. So if the choice is equal to the actual player's index, aka if it's their own name, then we simply just have them repick, which is just go through the loop again. So return. I'm not sure if that's the right.
It's the right approach. I think. Remember, we're doing one loop over this. I wouldn't have picked that out. I'm glad you know your those APIs better than I do. But again, like, we're iterating over the list just as a one time, right? Just that simple iteration over the input is our passing around the circle, right?
Right.
So if we're passing around the circle, then really each person gets one turn, if you will. And using Fred as the example, Fred pulls 0, Fred pulled his own name, Fred needs to pick again. So in theory, we need to just run the body of the loop again. What would be a way that we could do that?
Well, the brute force way to do it would be to just type the body of the loop again, but a more simpler approach could be to, I guess now that I think about it, that isn't that bad of an idea, is to just have him go through it again. So we just have him choose again. But then this time we could do it without that choice. So if choosing, then we want him to pick it out again, and doing that is essentially here, right? So, but then starting maybe something like, something like this, second. And so then we have him pick out again, but this time we are choosing now without his own name in it, which would be rand choice, and then from that to 4. So that would ensure that his name is not included in the second.
Valid for that use case, but let's think about another use case now.
Sure.
And you're on the right path here, but I think we just need to kind of restructure the control flow here.
Okay.
Fred pulling his name on the first try, it's a possibility. It's going to happen. Yeah, it's the first index in that loop. If we just remove that from brand choice, then it's no longer an issue. But what if it happens on Wilma and Fred hasn't received a gift yet? So the index of 0 still needs to be valid in there.
I see.
Right. So we couldn't just go from Wilma +1 to the end. In that case, we would have to still be inclusive of any names that haven't received a gift.
Right.
So throwing performance to the window. out the window, and it's not the requirement here, right?
Mhm.
What's a way that we could just run those 2 lines of code again?
Believe could be just continue maybe. But I think
that would execute the next step
right.
of the loop.
That's right. Let's see. So. Not break.
Could be use another loop, maybe.
Oh, that's true. So would we have the same logic within the nested for loop? Does that make sense? So
it's kind of the brute force method, but it's kind of like a do while loop, right? Where do while the rand choice is not equal, or sorry, is equal to the player's index. So as long as you keep pulling the player's index, try again.
So could do the same. Where we're let's see. So if it goes to the first, then it will add right, and then so. And we still want to click that. So in the first iteration, it'll take Fred, add it to the dictionary, and assign it a value. And let's say 0 gets picked. If Fred is equal to Fred, if Fred picks Fred, then just go through the loop again. I'm a little lost how it could still pick Fred again potentially.
So what I would change here would be just simply this. Oop. Wow. So while that's the case, because we don't want to iterate over the list of players again, that's not really necessary in this case. Right. But we're going to pick the random choice while they're equal, right? We're going to continue to keep picking. Then once you've gotten something that is not Fred, it's not, the player who's picking the name. Now we have a name who's not me. Now I've satisfied points number 1, because we're iterating over the list once and going around the circle. Points number 3, because definitely not giving or receiving to yourself, which means now we have the second bullet that has to also be accounted for here.
Right.
I think implicitly we're accounting for the 4th. This is happening at random. The second bullet now is how do we ensure the uniqueness of the recipient? So each person only receiving and only receiving a gift one time.
Mm-hmm. So just to understand you correctly, so the reason why we're doing this is so that this will, if this condition is so if Fred picks the same one, then it'll just stay within this loop, and then until that condition is exited, then it will still be within the for loop. That makes perfect sense. So then we now want to be able to let's see, only once. So now we have to somehow prevent the player from receiving a gift more than once. So let me just change this here so that the logic is the same. And so if we are exiting here, so let's say Fred chooses, So Fred chooses Fred and keep choosing again. And once he has chosen someone that's not Fred, then Fred will have chosen, let's say, 1. And so now he will exit and he will... Now, how do we determine that the player will receive 1 gift only? So
I think you touched on the basis for this earlier, right? If we have this dictionary that we can iterate over the keys in the dictionary, we're going to get a name, and the value at each one of those keys is going to be an index. How can we ensure, as we pick a new name or a new index to assign to a name, how can we ensure that that name that index has never been pulled before?
So you can check, see if it hasn't been. Well, so this assuming would be the index, or the index of the first iterated polled player. So if maybe we could do something like if rand choice has been polled already, then we have to take that number out of the list, or
almost like a second condition where, like, the while loop, and maybe even, and for the sake of time, we don't have to refactor this, but you could probably move the while to the top of the loop body, right, and restructure things a little bit so that everything's running under that condition. But the while loop conditions should be, I didn't pick myself, or sorry, the while continue working while I'm picking myself, or I'm picking somebody who's already been picked before, right? And that's that if statement that you're typing out there. How do we determine that somebody has been picked before?
So just to talk out loud, if they're if the randomly chosen number is equal to the value, like the key value in the dictionary, then that means it has been chosen.
Yeah, so just iterate over the dictionary and look to see, have we seen the value before? If yes, keep going, keep trying again, right? If not, it's valid. If not, and it's also not your own index, then it's a valid choice.
So in this dictionary, so maybe something like this. So in the dictionary, if we're going to look for that index, and if this has been chosen, so if this is equal to the player index, then so essentially what this is saying is the randomly chosen player's index within the dictionary, if that is equal to a certain player, then that's been chosen. But we don't want to remove them from the list. We simply just want to say that they can't receive another gift, so they can't be chosen again.
Yeah, so if they're present in that dictionary, because we have selected it before as a valid selection, then that should effectively rule it out, right? So using an example, let's say that Fred gives to Wilma. Fred gives to Barney. So 2 is assigned to Fred. Wilma goes and she draws, and we know that if Wilma continues to draw 1, that she'll continue to redraw because she can't draw herself. So we already got that covered. All right, so Wilma draws a 2 now. It's not her, so we can check the dictionary. But then when we loop through the dictionary, we can look at Fred. Fred's giving to 2. There's our condition, right? We don't have to that we can't give to Barney again because that index has already been used up.
Mm-hmm.
That does solve the problem, and it solves it actually completely. I think and again, just in the interest of time, we can talk through it. It's perfectly fine. I'm not picking on the code pieces, the specifics. There is one bug though that kind of gets left over. We can spend a couple minutes here talking through. You got the problem solved where we're iterating over the list of players one time. Okay, so everybody's giving a gift one time. We're selecting at random and based on these two constraints that I didn't pick myself and I didn't pick somebody who's already picked before, that we're satisfying the other two constraints of the game. And this is, like I said, it's happening at random. What would happen though if the last name in the list, in this case, Bam Bam has not given a gift yet, but also Bam Bam hasn't received a gift yet. So the only name left in the list is Bam Bam. What's going to happen to this program when you hit that case?
Let's see. So your question was what would happen if that were the case? So Bam Bam.
So the hat gets to Bam Bam, and Bam Bam pulls the name out of the hat, and the only name left in the hat, because he's the last one to go, and the only name left in the hat's Bam Bam.
I see. So then I guess we should probably put logic in so that it's removed from the list. But I feel like that's such a brute force way to prevent that from happening.
Like brute force is the way to go, but I wouldn't remove it from the list because Bam Bam still needs to receive a gift, right?
Right.
And this is one of those cases where it's not an even or odd thing. Like it's always going to happen. It's always a possibility that could happen. That the last person is the only person who hasn't been picked yet. In a real game of Secret Santa, this would be problematic because you're visibly seeing people pull the names. How could you solve for the case? And again, just talking through it, but how could you solve for that case when the last name in the list is the only name left in the hat?
So kind of thinking it in like a real world way, you could have potentially two additional people. So a pair, you could have them throw their, cards back into the hat, and then starting from Bam Bam, go through the list again. So have
try it again and
just try again. So with additional, that way it kind of ensures that Bam Bam will likely be able to have picked someone that, he can receive a gift and give a gift to. And the other two can keep going until they're able to get someone that's, that way Bam Bam is included as well. That would be my thought process.
Brute force. And like I said, performance doesn't matter here. That's not the question, right? The question's satisfying the rules. I think the other way too, and this is where the difference of software versus real world comes into play, is you can really just cheat and just swap Bam Bam with somebody else.
Right.
Because nobody has to know because there's no real people playing the game here.
Right.
Cool. We're exactly at time. Thank you for running through that. I know those aren't easy. What questions can I answer for you?
I would definitely say points of areas of improvement, kind of my thought process. What would be a better way to approach just general questions such as these? I feel like it's difficult to first comprehend the full problem at hand with the constraints into account without fumbling and running into edge cases. I mean, that's the whole point, but just kind of getting the full picture and stepping back, which seems to come so naturally versus just more of like a brute force method, which is like the better way to approach that. Yeah.
And I'll say this is one that I retired several years ago. purely out of boredom because I did it for like 10 years straight. But having seen, hundreds of candidates go through this, like people are all over the map in terms of how they approach the problem. And it's a hard problem, right? And the reason I've always liked this problem is that on the scale of folks who are very new to getting into programming versus folks who are very mature, very senior level, they solve it in very different ways. And me as an interviewer gives me a lot of insights that I can calibrate against, for how different folks approach it. But I think in general, in terms of the feedback, there's, I think, definitely confidence in data structures is an area that I would focus. I think, and this is where I kind of interjected early on, is a bit thinking about the data structure to use to track who's getting what, spending a heavy amount of time on that, which is really kind of just stems from that lack of confidence in, lack of a better term, syntactical tools, right? Stopping to think about, well, I'm going to use a for loop here. I'm going to use a dictionary here. Those kinds of things become instinctual over time, and practice just makes perfect. And the way to get better at a problem like this and to be able to dive into a problem like this just boils down to that. My earlier comment about having side projects, it can help there. Where I see a lot of folks really strive in this type of an environment when you're doing algorithmic type challenges. There's a million of these options online where you can go through and take practice coding tests. Those are a good option for just getting better at this. It does start to become second nature, and you start to see a lot of the caveats very quickly.
I see.
The reason I bring up the Bam Bam scenario here at the end is because, with exception of maybe 2 candidates that I've ever given this question to over the years, everybody falls on that part, right? And that's part of why I like the questions. It gives us an opportunity in every case where you can debug a problem.
Sure.
But everybody stumbles across that part except for 2 candidates who are extremely qualified and very, very senior in their careers. And so you should also remember that there's things here where I, as the interviewer, want to see. I write bugs. Everybody writes bugs. Like, we're all human. Like I said, I'm throwing syntax in here that I don't think is valid. But we're going to make mistakes. But how do we think through those mistakes, right? And just getting more comfortable with how you navigate through those types of problems, I think, is just where practice makes perfect.
Sure.
Nothing here stands out to me as particularly off or wrong or anything like that. A pretty standard approach to the problem. Nothing wrong with going brute force. Because again, and I mentioned this as you were going through it, I didn't ask you for performance. We can do this as slowly or as quickly as we wanted to execute. But as long as we get to the answer, that was really the goal here.
Sure. That's definitely helpful. I think for myself, just a small comment is so focused on the end goal as opposed to the journey with problems like this. I think that's really kind of the challenge, is kind of really focusing on not more of the syntax or the toolings, because I mean, like, the different data structures and algorithms, like, they're just means to an end, right? They're not the actual end all be all, like you were saying. So I think that's great feedback. So thank you.
Absolutely. Any feedback for me?
Honestly, it was very helpful and very, it was definitely a lot of fun for sure. It kept me at ease throughout, definitely pushing me in the right direction, and definitely showing me the logic in a more friendlier way than necessary. Sometimes it seemed like I was simply told the answer, which, not faulting you or anything, but it seemed like it was kind of being given instead of like being kind of like guided towards, which is, definitely helpful. But I guess in hindsight, I would say it would definitely be okay to kind of have myself or whomever to struggle a bit more, I guess, just to kind of go through that, phase of frustration to get those aha moments. That's just be my only 2 cents.
It's an interesting point, and one where I'm kind of undecided on, because, the reason I've developed that habit over the years of just sort of nudging people in the right direction is, for me, it's candidate experience, right? You don't want somebody to come away and say like, "Yeah, the company sucked to interview." Okay? At the same time, like as the interviewer, you need something that's going to be challenging. You're going to find the right talent. That's the line that you have to balance. And
right.
I am not in the popular crowd of technical interviewers who prefer the whiteboard. I know a lot of people shy away from it, but what would your preference be? Would it be towards being coached into the end solution and to get through a successful point of completion, whether hypothetical or not? Or would you prefer that if we had ended at a point where like you'd only solved 2 or 3 of the bullets, but we didn't solve everything?
Right. I would definitely say the latter. I think even though, because I think through those moments of frustration, even if you're not completing, I think I would say, having gone through it, it seems like the end goal shouldn't be the main focus or the main priority. None of this code will be, for prod, right? So it's not like we're gonna, we're trying to make like the most clever algorithm on the spot. It's, I guess, kind of trying to determine, the thought process and the bigger picture overall. So I would say my opinion would be that even having a more challenging question that forces the interviewer or the interviewee, to struggle and to go through those moments of frustration would be more insightful ultimately for the interviewer.
Okay, that's valuable. Thank you. I will say, and just another point of feedback for you, very positive aspect that, one of the things I'm always looking at, and a lot of candidates come down to this point, is you ask questions or you nudge in certain ways and give feedback in certain ways to see how somebody receives that feedback. And my nudging and prodding in here was a bit touching on that. And you were very welcoming to that, which for anybody, no matter how senior you are in your career, that's exactly what you want to see in a potential coworker, is somebody who, we can have a conversation and like, they're not going to get angry at you or something like that when you suggest one thing or the other, even if it's wrong.
Right.
So very receptive to feedback, which it's a very strong quality.
Thank you.
Cool. We are about at time, 1 hour. And so thank you.
Thank you so much, Scott.
Pleasure getting to meet you.
Hey, everyone. That was the interview. And I thought it went really well. Remember this, I have to say, most people aren't willing to, they're already scared of going to an interview, and they're definitely not willing to hop on camera. So seriously, kudos to Eric for doing this. This was phenomenal. And, I feel like I could almost empathize with Eric. I am someone that still gets nervous in interviews, and I think a lot of you can empathize as well. But, I think he did a great job working through those problems. And, this is his first interview. It's really cool to see him grow from this. And we even got to have a conversation privately afterwards. But I think Eric's going to do very well with his career. But let me know in the comments below if you're watching this on video. Definitely let me know in the comments if you're watching it on audio. There's going to be a link to our Discord server. You could just hop in and let me know there, or hop to the video. But either way, I want to know what you thought of this. I'm super curious. Thanks.